Hi everyone, this video is a short explanation about, it's like a quick overview about the difference between sex and gender. And I was sort of inspired to make this video as I was driving to work today because I had seen an article that made me think about a couple of these things. And I want to try to get this, as I bring in that article, I want to prime you to think about the difference between fact and versus opinion. So I'm going to come back to that, but I think it's going to be a theme in this class. So, and we're talking about facts. Sex and gender are different concepts, although they're related. And as you can see here, and hopefully you've already learned, sex is based in biology. It has to do with your chromosomes, your DNA, the chemicals and hormones going throughout your body, and the anatomy. And it's actually really, really complex. We all get taught that there's just male and female, and then you come along to college and they're like, by the way, it's a little more complicated than that. There are some people whose DNA is not as simple as XX or XY, and some people who it's so much more complicated than that. Those two chromosomes aren't even the only determining factor in your sex, your biological sex. There's all sorts of different anatomical presentations. And I'll admit, I'm not an expert in biological sex. You'd have to talk to somebody who is a biologist, a health education expert, like somebody who is into a geneticist. Those type of people are going to be an expert on that. And the reason why I'm not an expert on that is because it's not the focus of this class. What I'm more of an expert in is the social construct that is gender. So, factually speaking, sex is a biological expression. Gender is a social construct. So it's something that you learned from your culture, from your parents, from the rest of your family, from your friends, all these different things. It's probably something that you feel, and it's an expression or a performance. So it may or may not be tied to anatomy or to chromosomes, and they're two separate, although admittedly related, concepts. And for some people, sex is going to be more at play in their gender than for others. I know there's another video where I talked about that. So gender can be, I already told you it's learned, and it might also change over the course of time. It might feel differently to different people at different times. And there's all kinds of different reasons why that is. But factually, when we're talking about definitions, sex and gender related but not the same. So biology on one hand, social construct on the other. And I also wanted to highlight the fact that both of these concepts really, but especially gender, there is a lot of room in the middle. Like we might talk about masculine and feminine, but yeah, there are people who are more androgynous in their presentation, and they might exhibit characteristics of both masculine and feminine behavior, and it might kind of get mixed up together. It's really, really unique, and gender is also really personal. So you could see how that plays into it being fluid, it changing over time, it being a performance, because it's so personal. It might just change based on the context. So we tend to talk about these concepts in forms of binaries, and I believe that that's just because it's almost easier. It's incorrect, but it's easier for us to categorize because it's like a thing people want to do, right? They want to put people in boxes so that it's easy to understand. Unfortunately, gender is just not, it's so much more complex than that. It's not that simple. And it turns out if you watch the, I guess you have to listen to the podcast, sex is also not as straightforward as male and female. And there's lots of different variations, and we probably don't even know what all those variations are, if I'm being honest. Like, we haven't mapped the entirety of every part of our DNA yet. So, neither one is a binary, but they often get talked about that way because it's easier. And it's also what we were taught to believe. So we start to think that that's right just because that's what we were always taught to believe. And it's important that we recognize that there's a middle ground in there, because otherwise we start to get to this dangerous area of stereotyping. We're just not understanding the concepts as well as we should be. So I want to make sure that you understand that these are both really complicated in that sense topics, and we're going to focus on gender in this class, not really biological sex. I mean, it's basically after you learn the theories, it's going to kind of disappear, just going to be a footnote on everything we do. So yeah, just a little bit about the difference between sex and gender.